There are places on this earth where the ordinary rules seem suspended, where the planet's ancient mechanisms become visible, palpable, overwhelming. Places where time moves differently, where the human scale shrinks to insignificance against processes that dwarf our brief civilizations. The Naica Crystal Cave, hidden 300 meters beneath the Chihuahuan Desert in northern Mexico, is such a place. It is a cathedral built by geology, a sanctuary constructed over 500,000 years, where crystals larger than ancient trees cross the darkness like frozen lightning, like the swords of sleeping giants. To speak of this place requires a certain quietness of voice, a recognition that we are discussing something fundamentally beyond the everyday experience of being human. The cave exists at the intersection of the possible and the impossible, a space where extreme conditions have produced something that seems more fiction than fact, more dream than reality. And yet it is utterly real, documented, studied, measured. For a brief window in human history, we could visit this place, could stand, though barely, in the presence of its magnificence. Now it sleeps again beneath water and stone, returned to the conditions that birthed it, and we are left with memories, photographs, and the humbling knowledge that Earth contains wonders we can barely survive to witness. The crystals themselves defy casual description. The largest of them measure 11 meters in length, weigh 55 tons, are as thick as ancient redwood trunks. They are composed of selenite, a crystalline form of gypsum, transparent and translucent, catching whatever light penetrates the depths in ways that make them seem self-luminous, as though they have captured some essence of the Earth's inner fire and hold it still, frozen in geometric perfection. They cross the cave's chambers at impossible angles, forming forests of mineral spears, creating spaces between their massive forms where a human being can stand, dwarfed, overwhelmed, struggling simply to breathe in air so hot and wet it feels like drowning. This is the story of that cave, not merely the facts of its discovery, though those facts read like adventure fiction, not merely the science of its formation, though that science reveals mechanisms of surpassing beauty and complexity. This is the story of a place that changed how we understand crystal formation, that pushed the boundaries of where life can exist, that demonstrated Earth's capacity for patient creation on scales that make human endeavor seem like the flutter of a mayfly's wing. It is a story about what happens when geology becomes architecture, when chemistry becomes sculpture, when time itself becomes visible in the form of mineral growth so slow that years pass between one molecule's addition and the next. The story begins, as all such stories must, in darkness. In darkness and heat, in pressure and time, in water supersaturated with dissolved calcium sulfate, in conditions that would kill a human being in minutes, but which allow, over epochs, the formation of crystals unlike any others on Earth. It begins in the furnace beneath the mountain, where the planet's thermal gradient makes itself felt, where water circulates through fractured limestone, where tectonic forces and volcanic intrusions have created something unique in the long history of our world. And it emerges, finally, into human awareness through an accident of mining, through the puncturing of that sealed and perfect environment, through our species' endless hunger for the wealth hidden in stone. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Before we can descend into the cave, before we can even approach an understanding of what exists there, we must first understand the mountain itself, the mine that penetrates its flanks, the town that grew in the desert at its base. We must understand the centuries of extraction, the industrial processes that brought silver and lead to the surface, that created the economic engine that would eventually, inadvertently, breach the walls of a chamber that had remained sealed since before our species walked upright. We must understand the context, the human dimension of this story, before we can appreciate what was found. Naica, the town, sits in the state of Chihuahua in northern Mexico, in a landscape characterized by extremes. The Chihuahuan desert stretches vast and harsh, a terrain of creosote bush and lechuguilla, of limestone mountains thrust up by ancient tectonic convulsions, of basins and ranges sculpted by processes operating over tens of millions of years. It is hot here, brutally so in summer, the sun hammering down from cloudless skies onto stone and sand that radiate heat like furnaces. Water is precious, scarce, the gift that makes the difference between life and death. And beneath this arid surface, the earth holds secrets. The mountain above Naica is part of the Sierra de Naica range, limestone uplifted and fractured, mineralized by hydrothermal processes that date back 26 million years to a period of intense volcanic activity. Magma intrusions deep below the surface heated groundwater, causing it to circulate through fractures in the rock, dissolving minerals as it went, carrying them in solution, depositing them where conditions were right. This is how ore bodies form, how concentrations of valuable metals come to exist in veins and pockets that miners can find and exploit. Silver, lead, zinc, the mountain held them all, and for centuries people knew it. Mining at Naica began in earnest in 1794, though indigenous peoples had certainly known of the mineral wealth long before Spanish colonization. The early workings were primitive by modern standards, shallow excavations following the richest veins, extracting what could be reached with hand tools and explosives, simple crushing and smelting of the ore. But the deposits were rich enough to sustain continued interest, and over the decades, the mines went deeper, following the veins down into the mountain's heart. New technologies allowed access to greater depths. Better pumps removed the water that constantly seeped into the workings. More powerful explosives allowed faster advance through the rock. By the 20th century, the Naica mine had become a substantial operation, owned by the Peñoles Mining Concern, one of Mexico's largest mining concerns. Shafts and tunnels penetrated hundreds of meters into the mountain, following the ore bodies wherever they led. Massive pumps worked constantly to remove the groundwater that would otherwise flood the lower levels, water that rose from the depths, warm and mineral-rich, part of the same hydrothermal system that had created the ore bodies in the first place. The miners knew the heat. The deeper they went, the hotter it became, the thermal gradient of the earth making itself felt. At the deepest levels, temperatures could exceed 40 degrees Celsius even with ventilation systems working at capacity. The mine produced. Year after year, decade after decade, trucks carried ore to the surface, processing facilities extracted the valuable metals, the economic engine hummed. The town of Naica grew around this industrial core, its fortunes tied to the mountain's mineral wealth. Families were raised here, generations of miners following fathers and grandfathers into the depths, learning the trade, understanding the mountain's moods and dangers. It was hard work, dangerous work, but it was work, and in this harsh landscape, that meant everything.
The miners found crystals, of course. In a mine cutting through limestone, through rock that had been altered by hydrothermal processes, mineralized by circulating groundwater, crystal formations are common enough. Small cavities, geodes, might contain clusters of calcite or gypsum crystals, pretty curiosities that miners might pocket if they were small enough, ignore if they were not. Sometimes larger voids would be encountered, natural caves carved by ancient water flow, their walls lined with crystalline formations. These were noted, examined briefly, then the mine advanced past them, following the ore, which was, after all, the point of the entire operation. But in April of the year 2000, miners working at the negative 120-meter level, 120 meters below the entrance level of the mine, encountered something different. They were driving a new tunnel, advancing through the rock with drill and explosive, the same technique used thousands of times before. But when the dust cleared from one particular blast, when they advanced to see what had been revealed, they found that they had breached a void. Not a small cavity, but a substantial chamber, perhaps 10 meters on its longest axis, its walls and floor bristling with crystals. Selenite crystals, clear and white, blade-shaped, some of them half a meter long, many projecting from every surface, creating a forest of mineral spears that caught the light from the miners' headlamps and seemed to glow from within. It was beautiful, arresting, unlike anything they had seen before in years of working underground. Word spread quickly through the mine. Management was notified. People came to look, to marvel, to photograph. They called it the Cave of Swords, La Cueva de las Espadas, an appropriate name for a chamber lined with blade-shaped crystals. Scientists were contacted. Mineralogists came to examine and document. It was, they confirmed, a significant find, a large cavity completely lined with unusually large selenite crystals, certainly worth preserving, worth study. But the Cave of Swords was merely a prelude, a hint of what lay deeper. Later that same year, miners were working 2 levels lower at the negative 290-meter level, nearly 300 meters below the surface, at a depth where the heat was already oppressive, where the air had to be forced down by powerful ventilation systems, where every shift meant working in conditions that pushed the boundaries of human endurance. They were driving another tunnel, following another vein, and they encountered another void. This time, when they broke through, what they found was not a chamber 10 meters across, lined with half-meter crystals. What they found was something that should not exist. The space they had breached was enormous, a natural cavern roughly 10 meters wide and 30 meters long, its ceiling arching high enough to accommodate a 3-story building. But it was what filled this space that stopped them in their tracks, that made grown men, miners who had spent their lives underground, who had seen every variation of rock and mineral, stand speechless in the brutal heat, trying to comprehend what their lights revealed. Crystals, selenite crystals, but not crystals measured in centimeters or even half meters. These were crystals measured in meters, in dozens of meters, crystals so large that they dominated the space completely, that formed a 3-dimensional maze of intersecting beams and pillars, of translucent white forms that seemed to glow in the lamplight, that crossed and recrossed the chamber at every angle, some rising from the floor, some descending from the ceiling, some bridging the space between, some lying at diagonal angles that seemed to defy gravity and sense. The largest of them, and this fact would be confirmed by careful measurement later, was 11.4 meters long, 37 feet, longer than a school bus, thicker than a man was tall, weighing, by calculation, approximately 55 tons. A single crystal, a single continuous geometric form of calcium sulfate dihydrate, clear enough that light could penetrate its depths, regular enough that its internal structure was visible, its faces meeting at exact angles, its edges sharp and clean. And this giant was only one among dozens, among hundreds of crystals that filled the chamber, that created a landscape of mineral forms unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The miners who first entered that space were the first human beings to see it. Think about that for a moment. For 500,000 years, and we will come to understand that timeline later, that chamber had existed in darkness, in perfect darkness, sealed from the surface, sealed from any awareness except its own slow geological processes. The crystals had grown in silence, in stillness, in conditions of perfect stability, one molecule at a time accreting onto the growing faces, year after year, century after century, millennium after millennium. And then, in April 2000, light entered that space for the first time. Human eyes saw what had never been seen. Human minds attempted to comprehend what seemed incomprehensible. They called it the Cave of Crystals, the Cave of Crystals. And even that simple name could not capture the reality of what had been found, because this was not merely a cave with crystals. This was a space dominated by crystal formations so large they redefined what was possible, So beautiful they seemed crafted by intention rather than process. So extreme they pushed against the boundaries of what natural forces could accomplish given enough time and the right conditions. But standing in that space was almost impossible. The cave of crystals existed at the negative 290-meter level. At that depth, the Earth's thermal gradient meant that the ambient temperature of the rock was high, very high. And this particular chamber was not merely at that depth. It sat directly above a magma chamber, a massive intrusion of molten rock that lay only 2 to 3 kilometers deeper, that radiated heat upward through the intervening stone, that had maintained high temperatures in this region for millions of years. The chamber's temperature was measured at 58 degrees Celsius, 136 degrees Fahrenheit, and the humidity was not merely high, it was effectively 100%. The air was saturated with water vapor. Every breath scalded the lungs. Sweat could not evaporate, which meant the body's primary cooling mechanism was completely ineffective. Core body temperature began rising immediately upon entry. Without protection, without specialized cooling suits, a human being could survive in that space for perhaps 10 minutes before heat stroke became inevitable. With cooling suits, specialized garments filled with circulating ice water, fed from tanks carried on the back, survival time could be extended to perhaps 45 minutes, an hour at the absolute maximum, and that was pushing into dangerous territory. This was the price of entry. To witness the magnificent crystals, to stand in that impossible space, required accepting conditions that were fundamentally hostile to human life. And yet, people would pay that price. Scientists would pay it repeatedly, venturing down into the heat and the dark, carrying their instruments and their cameras, struggling to work in conditions where every movement was exhausting, where mental focus degraded rapidly, where the simple act of being present required constant physical effort.
But before we can understand what they found, what they learned, we must first understand how such a thing could exist at all. We must understand the formation mechanism, the specific conditions that allowed these giants to grow, the geology and chemistry and physics that operated over such vast timescales to create something unique in all the world. We must understand selenite itself, the crystal form, its properties and characteristics. We must understand the womb that birthed these magnificent structures. Selenite is a variety of gypsum, and gypsum is calcium sulfate dihydrate, chemical formula CaSO4.2H2O. A simple compound, really, abundant on Earth, forming in many different geological environments. Gypsum can be massive and opaque, the material that becomes plaster when crushed and heated. It can be fibrous, forming the material called satin spar. It can be granular, forming alabaster, or it can be crystalline, transparent to translucent, forming large, well-developed crystals that catch light and seem to glow from within. This crystalline form is what we call selenite, named after Selene, the Greek goddess of the moon, for the way it seems to capture and hold a soft, lunar luminescence. Selenite crystals are monoclinic, meaning they have a particular geometric arrangement of their constituent atoms, a three-dimensional lattice structure that repeats in a specific pattern. This internal order is what gives crystals their characteristic external forms, flat faces meeting at defined angles, edges sharp and straight, shapes that reflect the underlying atomic architecture. Selenite typically forms elongated crystals, blade-shaped or columnar, with striations running lengthwise along their faces, evidence of layer-by-layer growth. The crystals form when water containing dissolved calcium and sulfate ions becomes supersaturated, when it holds more of these dissolved minerals than it can stably contain in solution. Under these conditions, the dissolved ions begin to come out of solution to precipitate, and if conditions are right, they do so in an ordered fashion, building up the crystal lattice one layer of atoms at a time.
The process is slow, very slow under most circumstances. Each molecule must find its proper place in the growing lattice, must orient correctly, must bond to its neighbors. This takes time. But the rate of crystal growth depends on many factors. Temperature matters. Higher temperatures generally allow faster molecular movement, faster growth. The degree of supersaturation matters. The more oversaturated the solution, the faster precipitation occurs. Stability matters. If conditions fluctuate, if temperature or mineral concentration varies, growth becomes irregular or stops and starts, leading to small, malformed crystals rather than large, perfect ones. And time matters. Given enough time, given stable enough conditions, crystals can reach remarkable sizes. The Naica crystals required all of these factors aligned in a very specific way. They required water rich in calcium sulfate. They required high temperatures to keep that water supersaturated, but just barely so. Supersaturated enough that crystal growth could occur, but only just so that growth proceeded slowly, steadily, without fluctuation. They required absolute stability over enormous timescales. And they required all of this to occur in a sealed environment, a chamber isolated from the surface conditions where nothing could disturb the delicate balance. Beneath Naica, all of these conditions existed. The geology conspired, accidentally, to create the perfect circumstances. The magma chamber below provided a constant heat source, maintaining high temperatures in the rock above it. The limestone of the mountain contained abundant calcium in the form of calcium carbonate. Water circulating through fractures in the rock, heated by proximity to the magma, dissolved this calcium. Other minerals in the rock, including anhydrite, calcium sulfate without water molecules, also dissolved into the hot groundwater. When this mineral-rich water collected in chambers and cavities in the rock, when it reached saturation with dissolved calcium and sulfate, the conditions existed for gypsum to precipitate. But here's the crucial detail. The temperature had to be just right. Gypsum is a hydrated mineral, meaning it contains water molecules as part of its crystal structure. Anhydrite is the anhydrous form, the same compound without water. At temperatures above 58 degrees Celsius, anhydrite is the stable form. Gypsum cannot exist and will actually dehydrate to become anhydrite. Below that temperature, gypsum is stable. The cave of crystals existed at almost exactly that boundary temperature. The water filling the chamber was at approximately 58 degrees, maybe fluctuating a degree or two above or below, depending on exact local conditions. This meant that the water was supersaturated with respect to gypsum. It contained more dissolved calcium sulfate than it should be able to hold, but only just barely. Under these conditions, gypsum could precipitate, could form crystals, but the process was extremely slow. The driving force for crystallization, the degree of supersaturation, was minimal, and this, paradoxically, was perfect for forming large crystals. When crystallization happens rapidly, many small crystals form. When it happens slowly, fewer nucleation sites develop, and those that do can grow larger, monopolizing the available dissolved minerals. And the conditions were stable. This is perhaps the most important factor. The magma chamber below wasn't erupting, wasn't cooling rapidly, wasn't doing anything dramatic. It was simply existing, simply radiating heat upward at a more or less constant rate. The fractured limestone allowed water to circulate, but not rapidly, not in a way that would flush the chambers and change conditions. The chamber itself was sealed, no influx of cool, fresh water, no disturbance. For hundreds of thousands of years, the temperature stayed the same, the mineral concentration stayed the same. The chamber remained full of hot, mineral-rich water, and the crystals grew. Researchers who studied the cave were able to estimate growth rates by examining uranium-thorium ratios in samples extracted from the crystals, and by modeling the formation conditions. Their conclusions were remarkable. The crystals had been growing for approximately 500,000 years, 500,000 years, and during most of that time, they grew at a rate of about 1 micrometer per year, 1/1,000,000th of a meter per year, 1 millimeter every 1,000 years. At that rate, forming an 11-meter crystal would require roughly 11 million years, except that growth was not constant over the entire period. Early in the cave's history, models suggest that conditions might have been slightly different, allowing somewhat faster growth. Later, as the crystals became very large, growth slowed further. But even taking a more conservative estimate, the formation of these crystals required hundreds of thousands of years of absolutely stable conditions. Think about what that means in terms of Earth history. The crystals began growing during the Middle Pleistocene epoch, during a time when ice ages and interglacials cycled across the planet, when sea levels rose and fell by hundreds of feet, when the ancestors of modern humans were just beginning to develop the cognitive capabilities that would eventually lead to art and language and civilization. And through all of that surface tumult, deep beneath a mountain in what would one day be northern Mexico, water and minerals and heat remained in perfect balance, and crystals grew, one molecule at a time, in absolute darkness. The result, finally breached by miners in the year 2000, was unlike anything else on Earth. Individual crystals the size of trees, crystals weighing tens of tons, crystals so clear that light could penetrate deep into their structure, revealing internal features, growth lines, fluid inclusions, tiny imperfections that marked variations in growth conditions over the millennia. Crystals arranged in three-dimensional arrays that created spaces between them, tunnels and chambers within the larger chamber, places where a person could stand surrounded by selenite walls, by translucent white surfaces that glowed softly in any light. The visual impact was overwhelming. Photographs, even video, cannot fully capture it because they cannot convey scale, cannot make you feel the way these massive forms dwarf human presence. When you see a person standing next to one of the giant crystals in photographs from the cave, your mind struggles to reconcile the proportions. Surely the person is wrong, is somehow closer to the camera than the crystal. Surely the crystal is not actually that large, but it is. It is exactly that large, and standing in that space, experiencing it directly, produces a kind of cognitive dissonance, a feeling that you have somehow stepped outside the normal world into something else, something that operates by different rules. The crystals cross the space at every angle. Some rise from the floor at acute angles, their tips terminating below the ceiling. Some descend from above, massive stalactites and selenite. Some bridge the entire height of the chamber, floor to ceiling, angled pillars 10 meters long. Others lie at diagonals, or cluster in groups, or intersect each other in complex three-dimensional geometries. Walking through the cave, when it was accessible, when it could be entered, meant navigating between these giants, ducking under some, climbing over others, squeezing through narrow gaps, always aware of the immense weight of mineral hanging overhead, always aware that these formations, despite their crystalline perfection, were somewhat fragile, that a crystal face struck too hard might cleave along its natural planes, that falling against one of these giants could mean injury. But the difficulty of navigation was nothing compared to the difficulty of simply being present in the space. The heat was the dominant fact of existence in the cave. Every account from everyone who entered it emphasizes this point. The temperature and humidity combined to create conditions that were immediately, viscerally hostile to human life. Your body recognized the danger instantly. Heart rate increased, breathing became labored, sweat poured from every pore but provided no cooling because it could not evaporate. Within minutes, clothing was soaked. Within minutes, you felt the first symptoms of heat stress, dizziness, nausea, headache, confusion. The cooling suits helped. They were remarkable pieces of technology developed specifically for this environment. The suit itself was a series of tubes woven into a tight-fitting garment covering the torso and sometimes the limbs. Ice water from a backpack tank was pumped through these tubes, directly cooling the skin. This allowed the body to dump excess heat into the water rather than trying to cool through evaporation. It worked, after a fashion. It allowed trained individuals to spend 30 to 45 minutes in the cave instead of 10, but it was not comfortable. The cold water against the skin while the air outside burned created a bizarre sensory experience. And the suits were heavy, cumbersome, restricting movement in an environment where freedom of movement was already limited by the need to navigate around massive crystals. And there were limits even with the suits. The lungs still breathed the scalding, saturated air. The cooling effect had limits. Eventually, the ice melted, the water in the tanks warmed, effectiveness decreased. Mental acuity degraded over time despite the cooling. Complex tasks became difficult. Fine motor control suffered. Decision-making became impaired. Every expedition into the cave had to be timed carefully, planned precisely, executed quickly. Get in, do what needed to be done, get out before the heat won. This made scientific investigation extraordinarily challenging. Normal fieldwork in a cave might involve spending hours carefully documenting features, taking measurements, collecting samples, setting up long-term monitoring equipment. In the Naica Crystal Cave, researchers had to accomplish everything in windows measured in tens of minutes. Every trip required extensive preparation. Equipment had to be carefully selected, what was absolutely necessary, what could be left behind to save weight and hassle. Teams had to be coordinated, safety protocols had to be established and followed rigorously. Medical monitoring was essential, and despite all precautions, working in the cave was dangerous. People did suffer heat injuries. People did have to be helped out, cooled down, treated for heat exhaustion. But they kept going back, because what the cave offered was scientifically invaluable. Those massive crystals were not just beautiful, they were records. Records of the conditions that formed them, of the stability of those conditions over geological time, of processes that operated on scales we rarely get to observe directly. Trapped within the crystal lattices were tiny pockets of the water from which they formed, sealed inside when a growth incorporated a small void or when a crystal face overgrew a depression. These fluid inclusions contained actual samples of the ancient groundwater, preserved unchanged for hundreds of thousands of years. Analyzing them could reveal the exact chemical composition, the temperature, the mineral content of the formation environment. The crystals themselves could be dated using uranium-thorium dating techniques. Tiny amounts of uranium dissolved in the formation water become incorporated into the crystal structure as it grew. This uranium slowly decays into thorium over time at a known rate. By measuring the ratio of uranium to thorium in samples from different depths within a crystal, from near the base where growth began to near the surface where growth was most recent, researchers could construct a timeline of formation, could determine growth rates, could understand how conditions changed or didn't change over the crystal's life.
The cave also offered opportunities to study extremophile microorganisms. Life, it turns out, is remarkably persistent, remarkably adaptable. Even in conditions that seem utterly hostile, that seem incompatible with biological processes, life finds a way. The Cave of Crystals, with its extreme heat and humidity, its isolation from surface conditions, its unique chemistry, might harbor microorganisms specially adapted to this environment. And indeed, when researchers began looking, they found them. Microbiologist Penelope Boston led research into the biology of the cave. Her team extracted samples from the crystals, from the water, from mineral deposits on the cave walls. In their laboratories, they cultured microorganisms from these samples, coaxing them to grow, identifying them through genetic analysis. What they found was extraordinary. The cave harbored diverse microbial communities, including bacteria and archaea, some of which appeared to be unique species found nowhere else on Earth. These organisms had adapted to survive, even thrive, in the extreme conditions. Some of them appeared to have been trapped in fluid inclusions within the crystals, meaning they had been sealed away from the outside world for thousands of years, possibly much longer, preserved in a state of dormancy until the samples were extracted and cultured. This discovery had implications beyond simple biological curiosity.
If life could persist in the Naica Cave in conditions so extreme, what did that suggest about the possible range of habitable environments in the universe? Mars, for instance, might harbor liquid water deep below its frozen surface, water warmed by geothermal processes, isolated in chambers within the rock. Could such environments support microbial life? The Naica discoveries suggested it was possible, that life's boundaries were wider than we had imagined. The cave became a destination for researchers from multiple disciplines. Mineralogists studied the crystal formation mechanisms. Geologists examined the structure of the chamber itself, the fractures and faults that connected it to other parts of the hydrothermal system. Geochemists analyzed the water and rock chemistry. Microbiologists investigated the extremophile organisms. Crystallographers examined the atomic structure of the selenite. Each group contributed pieces to a larger understanding of this unique system, of the processes that created it, of what it could teach us about Earth and about the possibilities of geology and life. But access was always limited. The cave could only be reached because the mining company maintained massive pumps that removed the groundwater from the lower levels of the mine. Without these pumps, the natural water table would rise, would flood the lower levels, would fill the cave of crystals completely. The pumps represented a huge ongoing expense, consuming enormous amounts of electricity, requiring constant maintenance. They were justified by the mine's continuing production, by the ore that was still being extracted. But mining operations are finite. Ore bodies eventually become depleted, or the cost of extraction rises to the point where continued operation is not economically viable. The Naica mine had been operating for over 2 centuries. The richest, most accessible ores had long since been extracted. The company was now working progressively deeper, following thinner veins, dealing with higher costs. The question was not if the mine would eventually close, but when. And when it did, when the economic justification for the pumps disappeared, the pumps would be shut down, the water would return, and the cave of crystals would be flooded once more, returned to the conditions that had allowed its formation, sealed away from human access, possibly forever. This created a strange urgency around the research. Scientists knew they were working against a deadline, though they didn't know exactly when that deadline would arrive. Years, certainly, maybe a decade or 2 if the mine remained productive, but not forever, not indefinitely. Everything that could be learned from the cave, every sample that needed to be collected, every measurement that needed to be made, every documentation that seemed important, all of it had to happen within this window of access, and that window was slowly closing. The knowledge that the cave would be lost lent a poignancy to every expedition, every photograph, every moment spent in that extraordinary space. The people who entered it knew they were witnesses to something that most of humanity would never see, that might never be seen again once the water returned. They knew they were documenting something ephemeral, despite the fact that the crystals themselves had existed for 500,000 years and would likely exist for millions more. Human access was the ephemeral thing, the brief anomaly in the cave's long history. And there was a tension, too, between preservation and study. Every sample extracted meant damaging a crystal, removing a piece that would never grow back. Every footstep in the cave, every touch, every movement of equipment risked damage to formations that were, for all their size, relatively fragile. Selenite has a hardness of only 2 on the Mohs scale. It can be scratched by a fingernail. The crystal faces, so smooth and perfect, could be scarred or broken. Some researchers argued for minimal intervention, for preserving the cave as pristine as possible. Others argued that this was humanity's only chance to study this unique environment, that samples and data were invaluable, that preservation without understanding was pointless when the cave would soon be inaccessible anyway. In the end, a balance was struck. Research was conducted, but carefully. Samples were taken, but minimally, and from locations where they would cause the least visible damage. Documentation was thorough. Hundreds of photographs, detailed measurements, 3D scans of the crystal formations. The goal was to preserve as much information as possible before the cave was lost to access, while also preserving the physical space as much as possible for what? For a future time when perhaps technology would allow access even through the water? For the principle of it, for the sense that destroying something so magnificent would be a kind of sin. The miners who first discovered the cave had no such qualms. They were practical men, workers, not scientists or philosophers, but even they recognized that what they had found was special. Stories emerged of miners visiting the cave on their breaks, despite the heat, just to see it, to experience it. Some brought family members, against regulations, but the mine management turned a blind eye. How could they not? How could you deny someone the chance to witness such a thing? Some miners reportedly proposed that the company could make money by offering tours, that people would pay substantial sums to see the giant crystals. It was not a practical idea. The danger was too great, the liability too enormous, but the fact that it was suggested spoke to the recognition that this was something special, something that transcended the usual industrial concerns of ore grades and profit margins. The mining company, Peños, deserves some credit for its handling of the discovery. They could have simply sealed the cave, could have treated it as an inconvenience, a void that complicated their mining operations. Instead, they allowed access for researchers, facilitated expeditions, even provided some funding and logistical support for scientific study. They recognized that they were the stewards, temporarily, of something that belonged not just to the company or to Mexico, but to human knowledge, to our collective understanding of what Earth can create given the right conditions and enough time. But stewardship has limits. The company was not a charity, not a scientific foundation. It was a mining operation, responsible to shareholders, required to make economic sense. When the ore ran out, or when extraction costs exceeded revenue, the mine would close. That was simple economic reality. And when the mine closed, the pumps would stop, and the water would return, and the cave would be sealed. Not in intention, but by the simple fact of hydrology, of water seeking its level, of nature reasserting itself. That moment came sooner than many had hoped. In 2015, the Naica mine ceased operations. The ore bodies that had sustained it for over 2 centuries were depleted to the point where continued extraction was not economically viable. The decision was made to shut down. Equipment was removed from the lower levels, tunnels were abandoned, and the pumps, those massive machines that had held back the groundwater for decades, were shut off. The water returned. Slowly at first, then more rapidly, it filled the lower tunnels, rose through the shafts, reclaimed the space that had been dry for so long. Within months, the negative 290-meter level was flooded, the cave of crystals filled with water, hot, mineral-rich water at 58 degrees Celsius, the same conditions under which the crystals had formed. The giants were submerged once more, returned to darkness, returned to the womb of their creation. And there they remain, sealed below hundreds of meters of rock and water, inaccessible, invisible, continuing to exist in conditions that have been restored to the precise parameters of their formation. Are they still growing? Almost certainly, though at that infinitesimal rate, micrometers a year. Will they ever be accessible again? Possibly not in our lifetimes, possibly not ever. The cost of pumping water from those depths is enormous. Without the economic justification of ore extraction, it's difficult to imagine who would fund it. Scientific interest alone is unlikely to be sufficient. There have been proposals, ideas about installing permanent platforms above the water level in the cave, about developing equipment that could allow research even in the flooded conditions, about creating sealed access tubes, about various technological solutions that might permit some level of continued study, but all of these face enormous practical and financial barriers. The cave exists in a liminal space now, neither truly lost nor truly accessible. Schrödinger's cave, existing in a state between human knowledge and human absence. What remains then is memory and documentation. The hundreds of photographs that were taken during the years of access, the video footage, remarkable but limited, of researchers navigating between the giant crystals, the samples in laboratories, tiny pieces of those massive structures preserved for continued study. The data, measurements, chemical analyses, dates, observations, carefully cataloged in scientific papers and databases. The first-hand accounts of the people who entered that space, who experienced it directly, who carry that memory with them. And the knowledge, the understanding that was gained from those brief years of access. We know now, with certainty, that crystals can grow to sizes previously thought impossible under the right conditions. We know the precise mechanism by which this occurs. We understand the role of temperature, of saturation, of stability, of time. We know that extreme environments can harbor life, that biology is more adaptable, more persistent than we might have imagined. We know that Earth contains wonders we have barely begun to discover, that geology can produce structures of surpassing beauty and complexity, that the planet is still capable of surprising us.
The Naica Crystal Cave changed how crystallographers understand crystal growth. It provided real-world examples of processes that had only been theoretical models. It demonstrated that given enough time, hundreds of thousands of years, and stable enough conditions, crystals can reach truly gigantic sizes. This has implications for understanding crystal formation in other environments, other planets, other contexts. The principles learned at Naica apply anywhere that crystals form, adjusted for local conditions, but fundamentally similar. The cave also changed how we think about preservation and access. What do we owe to natural wonders? Do we have a responsibility to make them accessible, to allow people to experience them even at risk of damage? Or do we have a responsibility to preserve them pristine, untouched, even if that means most of humanity will never witness them? The Naica Cave forced these questions because it existed at such extremes, beautiful beyond description, but dangerous to access, scientifically invaluable, but at risk from study, temporary in its accessibility, but eternal in its existence. There is something profoundly moving about the idea that the cave has returned to darkness, to solitude, to the conditions of its formation, something appropriate about it being sealed away from human presence, allowed to simply exist without observers, without documentation, without the complications of being known. The crystals grew for 500,000 years without any awareness that they would ever be seen. They will likely exist for millions of years more in the same way, silent and magnificent in the dark, irrelevant whether anyone knows they exist or not. But we do know. For a brief moment in the long history of that place, for roughly 15 years at the beginning of the 21st century, human beings were able to enter that space, to stand in the presence of those giants, to witness what geology can accomplish given enough time and the right conditions. We measured and photographed and sampled and studied. We extracted what knowledge we could. And then we left, and the water returned, and the cave was sealed, and the crystals continue their infinitesimal growth in perfect darkness once more. There is a lesson in impermanence here, though perhaps not the one we might first think. The crystals themselves are effectively eternal on human timescales. They will outlast our civilization, our species, perhaps life itself on this planet. What is impermanent is access, is knowledge, is the ability to experience and understand. We had a window, and that window has closed. We were witnesses to something extraordinary, and now we carry that witnessing forward in memory and record, knowing that it may be centuries or millennia before anyone enters that space again, if ever. Other caves exist, of course, other places where crystals have grown large under favorable conditions. The Cave of Swords at Naica itself remains accessible at a shallower level above the current water table, its smaller but still impressive formations available for viewing. Other deposits of large selenite crystals exist around the world, in the pulpy geode in Spain, where crystals reach 2 meters in length, in Mexico's Cave of Giants, with formations measuring several meters,
in various other locations where gypsum deposits and hydrothermal activity have combined to create conditions for crystal growth. But none are quite like the giant crystal cave of Naica. None reach the same scale, the same magnificence. It stands, or rather it lies submerged, as the supreme example of what crystal growth can achieve, the upper boundary of possibility for terrestrial crystal formation. Those 11-meter giants, those 55-ton single crystals, represent something like a world record, a maximum expression of a geological process. And this raises interesting questions about limits. Why that size and no larger? The answer lies in the physics of crystal growth and stability. As crystals grow larger, they become heavier. They must support their own weight. Selenite is not particularly strong. It cleaves easily along certain planes, meaning it can split or break under stress. There comes a point where the weight of a growing crystal exceeds the structural strength of the material, where growth cannot continue because the crystal would break under its own mass. The Naica crystals may represent the approximate limit of how large selenite can grow under Earth's gravity. On a planet with lower gravity, perhaps larger crystals would be possible. On a planet with higher gravity, the limit might be smaller. This connects to the broader question of what crystal formation tells us about planetary conditions. Every crystal is a record of the environment that formed it. The size, the shape, the internal structure, the incorporated impurities, all of these contain information. The Naica crystals tell us about 500,000 years of extraordinary thermal and chemical stability deep beneath a mountain in Mexico. Other crystals in other places tell other stories. And when we find crystals on other worlds, as we have in meteorites, in samples from Mars and the Moon, potentially in the future on other planets, we can read those stories, can reconstruct the conditions that formed them. Mars, for instance, has extensive deposits of gypsum. Orbital instruments have detected it. Rovers have analyzed it. These deposits tell us that Mars once had liquid water, water that dissolved minerals from the rocks, water that formed lakes or seas where gypsum could precipitate. The crystals are much smaller than Naica's giants, nothing like the same formation timescales or stability, but they're evidence nonetheless of past conditions, past environments, past possibilities. Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon, might have subsurface oceans of liquid water, kept from freezing by tidal heating, warmed by the constant flexing of the moon's interior as it orbits the gas giant. If such oceans exist, if they contain dissolved minerals, if they have sufficient temperature and stability, could crystals be forming there? Could there be caves beneath Europa's ice filled with alien crystals, growing in darkness even more absolute than Naica's, growing in silence even deeper than Earth's deepest caves? We don't know, but Naica teaches us that the possibilities are broader than we might assume, that extreme conditions can produce extraordinary results. The cave has become something of a cultural touchstone, appearing in documentaries, in articles, in coffee table books about natural wonders. Images of the giant crystals circulate on social media, usually without context, sometimes with wildly inaccurate captions. People see the photographs and assume they must be manipulated, edited, exaggerated. Surely nothing that large, that perfect exists in reality. Surely the person in the photograph has been shrunk, or the crystals enlarged, or the whole thing is computer-generated. The disbelief is understandable. The crystals genuinely do look unreal, like something from science fiction or fantasy, rather than from Earth. But they are real. They exist. They are submerged now, inaccessible, but they exist still, massive and silent in the dark water, continuing their infinitesimal growth, adding layers one molecule at a time, patient beyond any human conception of patience. They will be there long before the current human generation has passed. They will be there after the civilizations that know about them have fallen. They will be there, in all likelihood, after our species has gone extinct, after whatever comes after us has risen and fallen in turn. They are, in their way, eternal.
And this eternality, this sense of vast time embedded in stone, is part of what makes them so compelling. We live such brief lives. Even our civilizations are brief, a few thousand years from beginning to end in most cases. We build monuments to try to achieve a kind of permanence, to leave marks that will outlast us. The pyramids, the cathedrals, the carved mountains, all attempts to touch eternity, to create something that will persist.
But we cannot compete with geology. The Naica crystals were not created with intention. No intelligence designed them, no consciousness willed them into being. They are the product of mindless physical processes: water, heat, dissolved minerals, time, operating according to the basic laws of chemistry and physics. And yet they achieve what we cannot. They are monuments vaster and more enduring than anything human hands have made. They are architecture on a scale that makes our greatest buildings seem trivial. They are art without an artist, beauty without intention, meaning without purpose. Or perhaps there is purpose, though not in any sense we usually mean. Perhaps the purpose is simply to demonstrate what is possible, to show what the universe can do, to be an example of order emerging from chaos, of complexity arising from simple rules applied consistently over time. The crystals exist because conditions allowed them to exist. They are large because conditions remained stable long enough for them to grow large. They are beautiful because the geometric necessities of crystal structure produce forms that human perception recognizes as beautiful. There is no deeper meaning required. The existence itself is sufficient. This is perhaps the most profound lesson of the Naica Cave, that meaning is not necessary for magnificence, that purpose is not required for wonder, that something can simply be, can simply exist, can be extraordinary without needing to be extraordinary for any particular reason. The crystals grew in darkness, unwitnessed for 500,000 years. They would have been no less extraordinary if they had never been discovered, if no human had ever entered that cave, if they had grown and existed and eventually dissolved back into solution without ever being known. But we did discover them. We did enter that impossible space. We did witness, however briefly, what 500,000 years of perfect conditions could create. And having witnessed it, we are changed. Not in any dramatic way, perhaps, not in a way that shifts the course of history or alters the trajectory of civilization, but changed nonetheless, in the quiet way that encounters with genuine wonder change us. We know now what is possible. We know what Earth can do. We carry that knowledge forward. The scientists who studied the cave, who endured the heat and the danger to extract measurements and samples, to document and analyze, they carry the most detailed knowledge. But even people who only saw photographs, who only read descriptions, who only heard about the giant crystals secondhand, they too carry something. An awareness, perhaps, that the world contains wonders, that beneath the surface, quite literally, processes operate on scales and in ways we barely understand. That geology is not dead and static, but active and creative, building and destroying, forming and reforming, operating on timescales that make human civilization seem like an eye blink. There's a particular poignancy in knowing that so few people got to experience the cave directly. A few hundred, perhaps, over the years it was accessible. Miners, scientists, photographers, filmmakers, a handful of others. Out of billions of humans on this planet, only a tiny fraction could truthfully say, "I have stood in the cave of crystals. I have seen the giants with my own eyes." The rest of us must make do with images, descriptions, second-hand accounts. We must imagine what it would be like, must try to visualize the scale, must attempt to conceive of standing in that heat, in that space dominated by crystal forms. And our imagining, however vivid, falls short of the reality. It must. Some experiences cannot be fully communicated. Some wonders must be witnessed directly to be truly understood. The photographs are extraordinary, crisp, well lit, carefully composed to show the crystals to best advantage, but they're flat, two-dimensional. They can't convey the three-dimensional maze of forms, the way the crystals create spaces within spaces, the way light penetrates their translucent depths. They can't convey the heat, the difficulty of breathing, the physical sensation of being in a place so hostile to life. They can't convey the strange cognitive dissonance of seeing something so large that shouldn't be that large, the way the mind struggles to reconcile scale and expectation. Those who entered the cave speak of it in hushed tones, even years later. There's a quality to their descriptions, an awareness that they witnessed something special, something rare, something that most people will never see. They described the practical difficulties, the heat stress, the cumbersome cooling suits, the challenges of moving equipment through tight spaces between massive crystals. But they also described the beauty, the overwhelming sense of being in a space unlike anywhere else on Earth, the privilege of witnessing something so extraordinary. One researcher described it as like being inside a living organism, as though the cave itself were breathing, pulsing with some slow geological life. Another compared it to a cathedral, but one built by natural forces rather than human hands, one where the architecture served no purpose but its own existence. A photographer spoke of the difficulty of capturing the space, of how every angle revealed new formations, new perspectives, new impossibilities of scale. A miner who had worked at Naica for 20 years before the discovery said that entering the crystal cave made him see the entire mountain differently, made him aware of what else might be hidden in the rock, what other wonders might exist in the dark spaces between the ore veins. These testimonies are what remain, along with the scientific data, along with the photographs and video. They are the record of human encounter with something profound, something that existed before we arrived and will exist after we depart. They are evidence that we were there, that we saw, that we understood at least partially what we were seeing. And now the cave sleeps. That's how one scientist described it, sleeping, returned to the darkness and the heat and the water, continuing its slow processes, its imperceptible growth, its patient existence. Perhaps in some far future century, when technology has advanced, when energy is cheap enough that pumping water from such depths becomes trivial, when humanity has developed better ways to cope with extreme environments, perhaps then the cave will be accessed again. Perhaps there will be a second era of human presence, of study and documentation, of wonder. Or perhaps not. Perhaps the cave will remain sealed, submerged, unknown except in records and memories, until eventually even those fade, until the hard drives fail, the photographs are lost, the papers decay, the knowledge disappears, until some far future civilization, if such exists, finds the mining workings, explores them, wonders what the ancient peoples were extracting, finds references to a crystal cave but cannot locate it, cannot access it, dismisses it perhaps as legend or myth.
Or perhaps, even more likely, the cave will simply exist, unvisited and unknown, until geological processes far larger than crystal growth change the conditions. Until the magma chamber below cools and crystallizes, removing the heat source that maintains the cave's temperature. Until the mountain erodes away, exposing the cave to surface conditions, allowing the giant crystals to dehydrate to anhydrite, to crumble, to return to powder and rock. Until tectonic forces shift and fracture the chamber, draining it, collapsing it, destroying the formations. Until, on timescales of millions of years, the evidence of the cave's existence is erased, leaving no trace, no record, no indication that something so magnificent ever existed. This is the fate of all geological formations eventually. Nothing is permanent on Earth's surface or beneath it. Continental plates drift, mountains rise and are ground down, ocean basins open and close, volcanic islands are born and eroded away. The rock that contains the Naica Cave is already ancient, hundreds of millions of years old, but it will not last forever. Entropy always wins. Order always returns to disorder. The crystals, those perfect expressions of atomic arrangement, will eventually become randomized, their constituent molecules scattered, their beauty dissolved. But not yet. Not for a long time yet by human standards. For now, For centuries to come at minimum, the giants sleep in their cave, submerged, growing their infinitesimal growth, existing in perfect stillness. They are there right now, at this very moment, 11 meters of selenite suspended in hot water, transparent and translucent, beautiful beyond description, utterly unknown except to the rock and the water and the silent dark. It's a strange thing to think about, that such magnificence exists, hidden, inaccessible, that the earth contains wonders we cannot reach, cannot witness, cannot even know about in most cases. The Naica Cave is unusual only in that we discovered it, documented it, studied it, before it became inaccessible again. How many other caves are there, sealed beneath stone or water, containing formations equally extraordinary that no human has ever seen and possibly never will? How many wonders does the earth hold that we can only speculate about? The answer, almost certainly, is many. The planet is vast, its depths largely unexplored. We have mapped the surface, mostly, though even there blank spots remain. Dense jungle, Antarctic ice, ocean floors. But the interior, the kilometers of rock beneath our feet, that remains largely unknown. We drill into it, mine into it, study it through seismic waves and gravitational measurements. But direct observation is limited to what we can reach, and we cannot reach far. A few kilometers at most, where mines and boreholes penetrate. Beyond that, everything is inference and theory. And this means that the Naica Cave, extraordinary as it is probably not unique. The specific conditions that formed it, magma chamber, fractured limestone, sealed chamber, stable temperature, those conditions exist in other places. Perhaps not in the exact same configuration, perhaps not producing crystals quite as large, but producing something, creating spaces and formations we have never seen and may never see. The Earth is an engine of creation, constantly making new things in the dark. New minerals, new crystal formations, new arrangements of matter ordered by physical law and vast stretches of time. We are privileged to live in an era where we can study such things, where technology and knowledge allow us to explore and understand. For most of human history, the Naica Cave existed but was utterly unknown, as inaccessible as the core of the planet. Our ancestors walked the surface of the Chihuahuan desert, lived and died in that landscape, never knowing what lay beneath their feet. The crystals grew, existed, continued through all of human civilization without any awareness of that civilization, without any connection to it.
And then, for a brief moment, the two intersected. Human mining, human need for silver and lead, human technology of pumps and drills and explosives, human curiosity and scientific method, all of this converged to make the cave briefly accessible, briefly knowable. We studied it intensely for those few years, extracted what knowledge we could, documented it as thoroughly as possible. And now that window has closed, and the cave returns to its state of isolated existence, and we return to our surface world, carrying with us the memory and the knowledge of what we found. This is perhaps the pattern of discovery. We find things, study them while we can, and then they pass beyond reach again, whether because conditions change or because resources run out, or simply because the universe is vast and our ability to explore it is limited. The Naica Cave is not lost. We know where it is. We know what it contains, but it is inaccessible, which for practical purposes is almost the same as lost. We cannot return to it, cannot conduct further studies, cannot show it to new generations of scientists or students or anyone else. We have what we have, the data, the samples, the photographs, and that must be enough. And it is enough, or it has to be. The knowledge gained from the Naica Cave has advanced our understanding of crystal formations significantly. The techniques developed for studying it, the cooling suits, the rapid documentation methods, the sampling protocols, can be applied in other extreme environments. The biological discoveries have implications for astrobiology, for understanding the limits of life. The simple fact of the cave's existence, the demonstration that such things are possible, expands our conception of what geology can accomplish. This is what we do as a species. We push against the boundaries of the possible. We explore the extremes. We go to difficult places and endure uncomfortable conditions because there is knowledge to be gained, because curiosity drives us, because we want to know what's there. The Naica Cave required that push. It was not easily accessible, not safe, not welcoming. Every expedition was a challenge. Every visit risked injury or worse. But people went anyway, repeatedly, because what was there was worth the difficulty and the danger. And having gone, having seen, having documented, we now carry that forward. The cave itself may be inaccessible, but the knowledge is not. The photographs circulate, the scientific papers are published and archived, the data is stored and backed up and made available to researchers worldwide. The physical cave is in Mexico, sealed beneath water and rock, but the knowledge of it is global, is part of human understanding now, part of what we know about our planet. This democratization of knowledge is one of the great achievements of modern science. The few hundred people who actually entered the cave are the direct witnesses, but millions can see the photographs, read the descriptions, understand the formation mechanisms. The cave belongs, in a sense, to all of us, even though none of us can visit it. It is part of our collective heritage, our shared knowledge of Earth's wonders. And perhaps that's enough. Perhaps it's better, even, that the cave is inaccessible. If it were easy to reach, if it could be turned into a tourist destination, would that be better? Thousands of visitors tramping through, inevitably causing damage despite best intentions, reducing the space to just another attraction, another box to check. Or is there something fitting about its inaccessibility, about it remaining pristine and untouched except for the brief period of scientific study? These are questions without clear answers. There's value in access, in allowing people to experience wonders directly. There's also value in preservation, in maintaining places in their natural state. The Naica Cave in its current submerged condition requires no management, no maintenance, no compromise between preservation and access. It simply exists, as it did for 500,000 years before discovery, as it might for millions more after.
And maybe that's the final lesson. That not everything needs to be accessible. That not everything needs to be experienced directly. That it's okay for there to be wonders in the world that most of us will never see, that exist beyond reach, that we know about only through photographs and descriptions. The knowing is what matters. The awareness that such things exist, that Earth is capable of creating them, that there are spaces beneath our feet where time and chemistry and physics conspire to produce magnificence. The Naica Crystal Cave stands, submerged now, dark now, growing still, as a reminder of this. A reminder that the planet is older than us, will outlast us, contains processes and timescales we can barely comprehend. A reminder that beauty does not require observers, that order emerges from chaos, not through design, but through the patient operation of natural law. A reminder that we are privileged to live in a time when we can discover such things, study them, understand them, even if we cannot always access them. The giants sleep in their cave. They have been sleeping for 500,000 years, through ice ages and warmings, through the rise of human civilization, through everything we consider history. They will sleep for uncounted years more, adding their micrometer layers, maintaining their crystalline perfection, existing in the perfect darkness and heat that created them. They need nothing from us. They require no maintenance, no protection, no acknowledgement. They are complete in themselves. But we needed them in a way. We needed to know they existed. We needed to see what was possible, what nature could accomplish.
We needed the reminder that Earth still holds surprises, that we have not yet cataloged and understood everything, that there are still wonders to be found. The Naica Cave gave us that, gave us all of that and more. It gave us knowledge, yes, scientific data, samples, measurements, but it also gave us something less tangible, and perhaps more important, it gave us a sense of wonder, of awe, of humility before processes vaster than ourselves. And that gift, that sense of wonder, persists even though the cave is now inaccessible. The photographs remain, the stories remain, the knowledge remains, and the crystals remain, growing their imperceptible growth in the darkness, patient beyond measure, beautiful beyond description, eternal in everything but name. This is the story of the Naica Crystal Cave, a story of discovery and loss, of human limitation and geological magnificence, of brief access to something extraordinary. It is a story about time, about patience, about what can be accomplished when conditions remain stable for long enough. It is a story about extremes, about heat that kills and crystals that grow, about life that persists even where it seems impossible. It is a story about the Earth, about its capacity for creation, about the wonders it contains. And it is a story without an ending, because the cave still exists, the crystals still grow, the process continues. Our chapter of the story has ended, our brief period of access has closed, but the cave's story goes on, will go on for eons yet, regardless of whether any human ever enters it again. The giants sleep, the water circulates, the heat rises from below, the dissolved minerals drift in solution, and molecule by molecule, with patience beyond human comprehension, the crystals grow. In the darkness beneath the mountain, in the heat and the stillness, the cave continues. It requires nothing from us, expects nothing, owes us nothing. It exists because the conditions for its existence align, because physics and chemistry and geology converge in this particular place, in this particular way. It is magnificent, not because we find it so, but because magnificence is an emergent property of order, of complexity, of scale. The universe produces such things not for our benefit, but as a consequence of its own operating principles.
And we, briefly, were witnesses. We descended into that impossible space, endured its hostile conditions, documented what we found, and emerged changed by the encounter. We carry the memory of those giants forward, preserve the knowledge of their existence, share the story of their discovery. This is what we can do. This is what we have done. The cave itself is beyond our reach now, returned to the conditions that formed it, sealed away from human presence. But we remember. In our photographs and our data, in our scientific papers and our stories, in the consciousness of those who entered that space and those who have only heard about it, we remember. We remember the giants in their cave, the crystal swords crossing the darkness, the magnificent products of 500,000 years of patient geological process. We remember. And in remembering, we honor what was found. The Naica Crystal Cave exists. Right now, at this moment, 300 meters beneath the Chihuahuan Desert, in darkness absolute and heat extreme, surrounded by hot, mineral-rich water, the crystals continue their existence. They are there. They are real. They are magnificent. They are, for now and for the foreseeable future, beyond reach, but they are there, growing their infinitesimal growth, maintaining their geometric perfection, waiting in silence for whatever comes next. This is their story and ours, the story of a brief intersection between human curiosity and geological wonder, of a window that opened and closed, of knowledge gained and access lost.
It is a story about the earth and what it contains, about time and patience, about beauty and extremity, about the fact that even in an age when we think we have mapped and measured and understood everything, the planet can still surprise us, can still reveal wonders we never imagined. The giants sleep. The cave endures, and we, having witnessed briefly what 500,000 years can create, carry that knowledge forward into whatever future awaits us, grateful for the glimpse we were given, humbled by the magnitude of what we found, aware that Earth's capacity for wonder far exceeds our capacity to discover it all. In the end, perhaps this is enough. To know that such things exist, that the universe produces magnificence, that time and stability and the right conditions can create forms of surpassing beauty. To know that beneath our feet, beneath the surface of the everyday, extraordinary things are happening, have always been happening, will continue happening regardless of our awareness. To know that we live on a planet capable of such creation, such patience, such geological artistry. The Naica Crystal Cave taught us this. The giants in their flooded chamber, growing still in the darkness, continue to teach us this. They are there, they are real, they are magnificent, and they will persist long after we are gone, testimony to what Earth can accomplish when given time enough and conditions right. This is their gift to us, the knowledge of their existence, the awareness of possibility, the reminder of wonder. And it is enough. It has to be, because the cave is sealed, the water has returned, and the giants sleep once more in darkness. But we remember. We will always remember, and in our remembering, the story continues, passed from person to person, generation to generation, a tale of crystal and heat and time, of human courage and geological magnificence, of a brief window into wonders that exist whether we witness them or not. The giants sleep. The story continues, and somewhere beneath the desert, in perfect darkness and extreme heat, surrounded by water that birthed them and will sustain them, the crystals of Naica grow on, one molecule at a time, patient beyond measure, beautiful beyond words, eternal in everything but name.